So you spend so much time trying to get this super accurate forecast in a world where no one is a psychic. So it's pretty much always going to be incorrect. It's never going to be actually what happened. So all of the time that you're spending trying to improve your mate, you could be spending looking at other more comprehensive KPIs.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Demand planning is a double-edged sword and it's tough to predict. Demand planning requires you to plan enough and then be nimble and agile while tweaking the demand as the market condition changes. Most companies take an algorithmic approach to their demand planning, resulting in wasting critical resources. The agile approach is especially relevant to SMBs as they may not have as many resources as their bigger counterparts. In today's episode, we have our guest, Dyci Sfregola, who discusses why companies should spend less time worrying about forecasting accuracy and more on execution. She also describes how demand planning differs from sales and operations planning. Finally, she has had time to discuss several KPIs that are meaningful and important for various industries. Let me introduce Dyci to you. Dyci is the founder and managing director of New Gen Architects, a new generation of solution architects that understand both business and technology. She holds a master's in engineering management and a certified supply chain professional from the Association of Supply Chain Management and is a supply chain SME for QS APM Americas. She has implemented supply chain tools for a dozen companies, including startups and billion-dollar enterprises. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey, Dyci, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. I'm so excited to be here.
Hey, we are super excited as well. Just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and current focus?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Dyci Sfregola, and I do at the CSCP at the end of my name, certified supply chain professional, because I am very proud of that part of my personal story. So just a little bit of background about me, and I'll keep it very quick. I've been in the supply chain space for almost about 5 years now, and I very much just kind of fell into supply chain. I got my first degree. I studied Spanish linguistics and literature, and then I went into marketing and sales. So I was very much, I would say, touchy-feely, personal versus technical background there. And then back in 2015, I was actually working as a product specialist for Jaguar Land Rover. And I met some engineers that were working on some really cool stuff for the cars. And I thought, you know what, I want to be an engineer. And was never really good at math, never really good at science. I avoided it like the plague my first round of undergraduate study when I was at the University of Georgia. And I decided, you know what, it's going to absolutely be a challenge, but I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to make it work. So I went back to school for industrial engineering, which my father, who is doing a PhD in electrical engineering and has 2 degrees in systems engineering, tells me is not a real engineering track. But I think it was actually perfect for me because what I got from industrial engineering was an introduction to supply chain and logistics just through some of my elective courses. And it was a very good mix of being able to understand the business perspective of why a lot of the critical thinking tools you learn in engineering are actually relevant to people management, business growth, and then especially logistics and supply chain. So that took me into consulting, and I have been doing supply chain consulting for a couple of years now, specifically focused on the planning-based, cloud-based tools. So supply planning, S&OP, demand planning, inventory management. And my current focus, I actually started my own firm back a couple of months ago, and we focus on helping organizations get ready for their implementation. So if they're going through what I like to call a technology-driven transformation, a lot of companies just don't really know where to start. So we work with the smaller companies to help them get started and get prepared. And then I also have a relationship with Curis on the enterprise level, where I serve as a supply chain subject matter expert for Anaplan implementations. So my current focus overall, I would just say, is helping organizations understand how to grow their businesses through supply chain transformation, and leveraging technology where it's appropriate, which I do not always believe that you have to invest in technology in order to improve your supply chain operations, contrary to what might be, common message right now that I feel like a lot of supply chain practitioners are being bombarded with.
So you claim that you are not good at maths, but in your blood you have a lot of math. Your dad is PhD in electrical engineering, and you are doing a lot of work with respect to your supply chain planning. So I don't know how you manage that. But in any case, we'll be digging more into that. Before we do that, we have a standard question for all of our guests, and that is going to be your perspective on growth. When you think of business growth, what does it mean to you, Dyci?
Growth to me, just I would say on a very superficial level, is getting more revenue and serving more customers on a very superficial level. On a deeper level, it is growing your business in a way that also contributes to what I would say just the human experience. So everyone is working and trying to do something fulfilling. Everyone wants to be fulfilled in life. And we spend a lot of time at our jobs. So from an entrepreneurial perspective, which I can now kind of speak in first person about, if I even just think about growing my consulting firm, I think first about the people that I employ and the consultants and the analysts that work with us, and creating fun experiences for them where they can grow in their careers. So that's learning new skills, that's interacting with new industries, interacting with new types of people, doing things that they would not have necessarily done before. And, you see it a lot, the different memes and quotes and things like that. If you treat your people well, they will treat your customers well, because they're happy. Happy people do things for other people. And that is how you just organically grow, because if your customers are happy, they're going to bring you more customers. And then from there, your entire company, again, kind of going back to that superficial, it has to make dollars to make sense. Bottom line, you get more market share, you get more customers, you get more revenue. So that's my perspective on growth.
Okay, amazing. So yeah, it's all about people. That's all I can say, whether you are talking about employees or customers. On that note, let's start our today's topic, and that is going to be demand planning. So Dyci, what I want you to do is I want you to sort of discuss your recent engagement or recent engagements and tell us the kind of situation they were in. I can almost guarantee that when you are walking into the door at your customers, they are probably not going to be ready for demand planning. So I'm pretty sure they are going to have some sort of symptoms that you go through and prep them for for the demand planning. So tell us, and you can go into detail, you don't have to rush for this one. Tell us, what the state they were in, what kind of changes you would propose to these businesses so that they are going to be ready for the demand planning that is going to work in the real world.
Yes, absolutely. So where do I start? I have so many ideas just going in my head right now, and I want to present them in a logical way that you can follow and even the listeners can follow without me kind of jumping all over the place. So I would say the first thing that if I think about, let's think about it from the perspective of the types of requests. So if we are talking about just the very initial engagement or interaction that you have with a prospect before they even become a client. So they are at the point to where they have some type of pain and they believe that the solution to that pain is to improve their demand planning. Oftentimes, because I'm in a technology space, they believe that the way to improve that demand planning is to invest in some type of technology tool that they think is going to give them a better output than what they receive from whatever Excel or Google Sheet, or sometimes I've even talked to a client who they've been doing no demand planning at all. They've just been hoping that they have product and when people make orders that they can ship out that product. So I like to challenge when I talk to prospects to understand, first of all, not even why do you think you need technologies, because as I previously said in my intro, you don't always, the resolution, the solution is not always to buy a piece of technology, but why do you even think that your problem is in the demand planning? Because I hear a lot of, well, we're having trouble and challenge executing on the demand plan, or, we can't fulfill the orders that we get from the demand plan, et cetera. And my first thought is, well, that's not a problem with your demand planning. That's a problem with your S&OP process. And, or, if you don't have a robust S&OP process, that's a problem with just cross-functional collaboration and communication with your supply planning team or your production planning team. You have a demand planning issue. So I kind of even start back even further. And, you even ask, what does demand planning mean? Because from the perspective of, again, talking to prospects, and they start walking us through what is this quote unquote demand planning process that they want to replicate or improve with a software, they oftentimes say, yes, we want to improve upon our S&OP process. And then that S&OP process is just a demand plan, or we want to improve our AOP, annual operating plan, which is really just you did a demand plan once the entire year, and you're not now considering all of the changes that are happening daily, weekly, monthly, depending on how fast your business runs. So there's a lot to unpack right now in the industry when people even say demand planning. There's a lot of a distinction that we can make between, making your budget, making your annual operating plan, actually executing a sales and operations process, or an S&OE, sales operations execution process, and then the demand planning, which is actually part of all of those processes. So it is very interesting right now. After you talk to a prospect, you have that conversation. Let's say that the pain actually is demand planning. You actually do need to either improve or implement some type of demand planning process. Well, then what we start to see is that they have an Excel spreadsheet and they have some formula that is probably something that someone brought over from another lifetime when they were at another company, or it's something that someone found on Google, or even if you have someone who studied supply chain, like I did, I took a couple of supply chain, focused courses in doing industrial engineering and then doing my master's in engineering management. And there are some very textbook formulas on how to plan demand that no way really reflect the life that we live now. It does not reflect the universe in which we live. So it's so interesting to me, as a consultant in the technology space, I make it a point to know about as much technology that applies to supply chain as possible so that I can help guide my clients through the tool selection process, pros and cons of certain types of tools, use cases, industries, things like that. And there are a lot of startups and a lot of softwares that are now using, AI and machine learning and different types of formulas and algorithms to plan or to come up with a demand forecast. So it's always interesting when clients say we need to improve our demand plan and we need to have more forecast accuracy. So everyone's focus is always forecast accuracy, forecast accuracy, forecast accuracy. And I always challenge that because while you do want to improve your forecast accuracy, I see so many companies putting so much time, energy, and resources, and resources, again, whether that be time, energy, people, dollars, whatever it is, on trying to improve that like 1% or 2% of forecast accuracy. And at the end of the day, the vast majority of the times, I don't want to make a blanket, kind of ultimate statement and say your demand plan is always going to be wrong, because maybe you have a very reliable business where you know that this customer is always going to order this number of units on this day of the month, and that works like clockwork. And if I say your demand forecast is never going to be right, then someone is going to say, no, I have this, customer that orders religiously every day of this month and blah, 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 et cetera. But I guess even to that, I can challenge and say, well, did they order that during COVID? You know what I mean? Or do they order that when there's a hurricane? Do they order that when tariffs change? Do they order that when there's a strike? So there are tons of supply chain disruptions that can throw off that forecast accuracy. So you spend so much time trying to get this super accurate forecast in a world where no one is a psychic. So it's pretty much always going to be incorrect. It's never going to be actually what happens. So all of the time that you're spending trying to improve your MAPE, you could be spending looking at other more comprehensive KPIs. So KPIs that speak directly to your reliability, your responsiveness, your agility. Those things are a lot more important from a demand planning and demand management perspective, I would say, than is my forecast accurate? Because when you talk to a lot of companies and they say we want to do a demand planning project, what they are really often saying is that I want to improve my demand planning or my demand forecast accuracy. So again, I kind of go back and I challenge them and I say, why? Why do you want to improve your forecast accuracy? And what happens more often than not is that, again, it goes back to an inability to execute on the demand plan. So it's not the demand plan itself that needs to be improved. It is the process in which the operations side and the execution side of the company is able to actually execute on that demand plan. So you would really want to be looking at KPIs like delivery, accuracy, fulfillment, your number of returns, your cycle time, and that's delivery cycle time, return cycle time, make cycle time, just kind of anything that goes into your order fulfillment. And then you want to look at KPIs that go toward, again, agility. So your upside supply chain adaptability and downside supply chain adaptability. And these are all score metrics. So supply chain operation reference, that's what I'm kind of thinking of in terms of where you even go to look at those. Because very often when I talk to prospects about demand planning and even just inventory management, supply chain planning in general, and I ask, well, what KPIs are you looking at? So if you want to improve this process, if you're looking at new technology, et cetera, what KPIs are you using to determine what that ROI is going to be? Because you should have made a business case for even spending the investment of time, energy, and resources and dollars in the project of improving your demand planning process and in the idea of implementing a new technology. Someone made a business case for that. So what was the business case? What KPIs are you looking to improve? What are they currently? Where would you like to be? How are you determining what the end goal is? Is it an industry book benchmark? Is it are you looking at the average? Are you looking at best in class? Like, who are you comparing yourself against? And Sam, I don't think you would be surprised, but it never ceases to amaze me. I am always surprised at the number of companies who either have this laundry list of KPIs, literally like 80 KPIs.
Yeah.
And then the number of companies that say, oh, we don't have any KPIs.
Yeah.
And I just think, well, what's the point of even how are you determining your ROI? How are you determining if you are maybe you are doing a good job already? Or how do you even determining that you're not doing a good job? Is it just because John in demand planning told me that there were going to be 30 and we only fulfilled 15. So there must be something wrong with our demand plan. But if you don't have any KPIs and no one's looking at these things and measuring them, and or if you have 80, how do you even know which one actually reflects how your business behaves? Because in the case of we have a laundry list of KPIs, it's because as you grow, you get people who come from different perspectives and they've come from different industries. And where I was at, we had this KPI and it was important. And where I was at, we had this KPI, it was this important. And again, because the industry is changing so fast, people sometimes, and it's okay to admit, just don't know what they're doing. We're all trying to figure it out because these are unprecedented times. We've never lived this before. So even you see Gartner and CSCMP and even the big firms, consulting firms that you look to for thought leadership, or they're putting out the white papers, the McKinseys, the Deloittes, et cetera. Even they have researchers. Everyone's just offering up what could be possible solutions. So that's how you end up with this laundry list of KPIs, because someone read this here and someone saw this in a webinar and someone went to a conference, and then you end up with all these KPIs, but which ones actually are relevant to your business and which ones are actually relevant to your customers and provide value? Because otherwise you just have people who are spending time and hours calculating all these KPIs, but let's just be honest, even leadership doesn't know what it means. So why even spend the time? Why even spend the time doing it? So that perspective of the demand planning pieces is where customers are. But even taking it a step further, let's say that I talk to a customer and I challenge them to say, you know what, your demand plan is not the problem, but the way you plan your demand is the problem. And that there's a very subtle nuance there. So, if you take the demand plan, that's just the act of saying, okay, this is what I think is going to happen we're in April now. This is what I think is going to happen in June. So let's tell the production team to prepare for, they need to produce this many units. or let's plan, let's tell the supply team, the inventory team that we need to have enough product to meet this demand by June. That's just your demand plan. Like, okay, cool. You gave me some numbers and you embarked on some linear process to where Sam, you and I are on the demand side. Let's say, marketing, sales, we're a small team. We do it all. So we come up with some numbers based off of, talking to our customers, based off of what we see in the market, a couple of different just human insights. We put it into Excel, Google Sheets, even if we have some fancy planning software, we put it in, we get a number out, we send an Excel spreadsheet and or an email to the production team, and we tell them, make it work. So that is a problem with your planning of demand, because you and I, we just sat and we talked about all of these different insights, and, we maybe talked about prioritizing the demand from the different customers. We maybe talked about how we're going to influence that demand with, with promotions and putting things on discount, or even increasing the price. If you don't want people to buy as much as something, maybe you increase the price on something. But if you and I just sat in that conversation and we didn't have anyone from the operations side, we didn't have a supply planner, we didn't have an inventory manager, we didn't have a production planner to talk to us about the capacity and the ability to actually produce the units that we are saying we're going to sell in this promotion. And we didn't tell them that we increased this particular unit volume in production because we have customers that are wanting XYZ during this time period. If we didn't tell that to the production team and the warehouse team and everyone else, then we didn't really actually do a good job of planning our demand. So we didn't have a collaborative effort. It shouldn't be linear. And a lot of times when we get into the conversations of let's improve our demand planning process, I always ask, well, how's your supply planning or your production planning process, depending on the type of, customer. If it is a manufacturer, then of course it's, production planning, MRP, MPS. And then on the other side, if you're just making orders, then I might just ask, well, what's your supply plan or inventory process look like? And then the customer says, or the prospect says, oh, no, that's fine. We just want to do demand planning. Or it's funny because on the opposite side, they say, yeah, we just need to improve our supply planning. The demand planning is fine. And just the fact that customers don't want to work on both of those processes at the same time demonstrates to me that they don't really understand the power of S&OP. And if you work on a point solution for the supply and production planning side without considering how that is influenced by the demand side of the organization, or vice versa, you work on your demand planning without including how any changes or outputs are going to affect the supply plan and production planning, then I don't want to say it's a futile effort, but you're really leaving a lot of ROI on the table. You're leaving a lot of dollars that you could save and a lot of improvement in your operations and executions process that you could realize. It just doesn't, it baffles me that people want to improve their demand planning process without improving their supply planning or production planning process, or even talking about it without even bringing the other side of the organization into the conversation, because that's really the first step. There's so many times where we get into these technology implementations, and from one side or the other, I always like to use the SIPOC framework, which might be a little, I'd say unorthodox from the perspective of process mapping, because SIPOC, your supplier, input, process, output, customer, it's more so focused on the supply chain side, kind of, again, going back to things you just learn in school, like basic frameworks that can be applied to various situations. I like that. I like to use that framework when I talk about different steps in a process, because it makes people think. If I say, okay, the P, that's what you're doing, but there's some data that you got from somewhere to start doing what you're doing. So where did it come from? And now you're done doing what you're doing. What's the output and who are you sending it to? And what that really makes people realize is, oh crap, this isn't just me doing this. Someone in a whole other department sent me that. And I'm sending this to someone else in a whole other department. So what I do is not isolate it. So why are we planning in silos? Like, why are we talking about improving this process without talking about or including stakeholders from whoever I'm getting the input from and whoever I'm giving my output to? So it just comes down to a lot of, kind of overall wrapping it up. I would say the conversations that we're having with prospects and clients around the demand planning piece right now really comes down to what I see is, I don't want to say not understanding, but really maybe underestimating just how much the supply chain is married together. Like, you can't do one thing without affecting another part of the supply chain. And I will say it and scream it from the top of the hilltops for whoever will listen to me as often as possible, that the supply chain is the lifeblood of the organization. Every business decision you make at some point in some way manifests itself in the supply chain. And when people say supply chain, a lot of times they think logistics, or they think manufacturing, or they think distribution, or they think the warehouse, or it's just, the actual, like you said, demand planning. Like, sometimes that is just the extent of what people consider supply chain. But when you really think about all the different pieces of supply chain is finance, supply chain is marketing, supply chain is sales, supply chain is manufacturing, transportation, all of that stuff together. But it's your entire company. Your supply chain is your entire company. And I think that, of course, now with COVID, people are really realizing that. You know what I mean? The supply chain is very, very important. It is procurement. It is all of those things together. So you can't say we want to improve our supply chain without touching on every single piece of the supply chain. Now, obviously, you can't boil the ocean. You need to take everything a bite at a time, but that's why you do a roadmap. That's why you sit down and you truly understand all of the dependencies. You understand your organizational goals. You have a good foundation before you say the problem is demand planning. Because if you ask yourself, if you do the 5 whys, kind of going back again, just like Six Sigma, lean, base frameworks, ideas. If you do the 5 whys, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why? The more often than not, it's not because you need to improve your demand plan accuracy. And it's not because you need to just do supply planning improvement or inventory management improvement. It's a little bit of everything.
Okay, amazing. So obviously, supply chain planning is pretty much everything in the company, right? So obviously, you mentioned a lot of different terms there, and a lot of listeners may not have as much supply chain background. Do you want to unpack a little bit in terms of what exactly is demand planning and what is the sales and S&OP planning, sales and operations planning? And give us some examples in terms of where the demand planning is in the organization. So the people who may not be aware of the demand planning, give us some examples of the sales and operations planning versus the demand planning.
Yes, definitely. And it's interesting that you asked that, because someone actually just at Curious a couple of months ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, asked me even kind of further, what's the difference between S&OP and connected planning? Because I talk a lot about connected planning. I love Anaplan as a tool for certain use cases and for certain size organizations. And they really coined that connected planning piece. So I would say, to answer your question, though, from a demand planning versus S&OP perspective, high level, very simple answer, your demand plan is part of your S&OP process. So your S&OP process is that cross-functional collaborative process that involves the different points of the organization that I mentioned. So your production team, the demand side of the organization, or sales. So that's the sales piece of it. That would be marketing. That would be your sales team, your actual demand planners who take all of those insights and they look at, the different drivers for whatever the demand forecast is going to be, and they come up with that demand forecast. And then the OP, the operations side. So, your supply team, warehousing, production, all of those different sides of the organization. You come together after you have a demand plan from the demand side, from the sales side, you come up with a consensus forecast. And what that consensus forecast does is to look at, what the demand forecast is, and then you consider all of the different constraints. So your capacity constraints, lead time constraints. You look at all of the different insights and assumptions just from the market that you might not have control over, but you do have to consider in considering what the output of your S&OP is going to be. Because what the output is a consensus demand plan, essentially, that the entire organization agrees this is feasible and we can do this. Because otherwise, if you don't have an S&OP process, what you end up with is just, again, that linear step of, okay, I sat down as a demand planner and I have some numbers, and now I'm sending it to you, production planner, and I need you to make this stuff. So I took into consideration nothing at all as it relates to whether you have production capacity, whether assets will be online or offline, whether you have even the workforce that can run those machines that are required to meet the demand that I need. I did not consider any of that, but hopefully, you can work it out. So that's just the demand plan being sent to the production team. The S&OP process is, we're sitting together and we are looking at a structured demand prioritization policy. We're looking at a structured demand prioritization process. We're looking at the same source of truth for data. And we're also looking at how that affects the bottom line and the dollar, so the cost. And there are financial metrics that are associated with the supply chain and with production. So we're looking at all of those things together again and coming up with a consensus demand plan that we can all agree to. So I have a couple of things that I've written that people can definitely go and take a look at as it relates to sales and operation planning, as it relates to planning and managing demand, as it relates to being prepared for a supply chain digital transformation, whether you need tools or not. So I'm definitely happy to share that with people because, this conversation could go on and on forever.
So let's talk about some of those metrics that you mentioned. What are some of the KPIs that you find that every company must have when they are doing either the S&OP planning or the demand planning? What are your favorite KPIs?
My favorite KPIs are very simple. I like to do cycle time. I like to do, and I don't know if this would be considered a KPI for some people, but days of supply versus weeks of supply, depending on how fast your business runs. And then fulfillment. So on-time fulfillment, on-time and full fulfillment, order accuracy. So I focus a lot on the customer-facing metrics. So how fast are people getting stuff? And then, of course, just financially, like days of supply, weeks of supply, how is that affecting the bottom line? How much inventory value do we have on the books at any one time? And how is that affecting our ability to serve customers? So service levels. I really focus, I would say, on a handful, like maybe 10 max. I have found kind of industry agnostic are the ones that really matter from my perspective.
Okay.
And upselling customers.
That's amazing. So that's it for today. Dyci, do you have any last minute closing thoughts by any chance?
Yes, I do actually. So just, kind of focusing back on what I mentioned in that we, New Gen Architects, what we do is to help organizations prepare for technology-driven transformations. And then on the side, if Kira is being in an enterprise level, just doing actual implementations and data readiness and things like that. There's a stigma almost, I think, of asking a consultant for help. And when I first went into consulting, my first supervisor told me that there was the saying of, you hire a consultant to look at your watch to tell you what time it is.
Yeah.
But that's not true. You know what I mean? If you hire, doing it alone is hard. It's really hard. And there are so many different aspects that go into technology-driven transformations. I mean, you're on the ERP side, what goes into just doing an ERP implementation. So imagine if you're trying to do an entire overhaul of your business or even just your supply chain, and you're trying to evaluate different point solutions. You're trying to evaluate connected planning tools, cloud-based tools versus on-site, because there are some industries where you still need to be on-site. You have regulations and you have sensitive information, so you need to do it on-site versus, in the cloud. You just, cybersecurity, things like that. The risk, you just risk averse. You don't want to go down that path. There's so many different things to think about. And if you're staying up at night as a leader, trying to figure out how to make it all happen, calling a consultant doesn't mean you don't know how to do your job. It just means that you need some extra temporary help. You're not going to hire someone full time if you just need help for 6 months, but you have some goals and you need to execute on them. So what you just need is a thought partner, a trusted advisor to navigate the muddy waters of technology-driven transformation, to ask the right questions, to get the right answers, to keep everyone on track, to advise on the different, skill level and the different skill set that is going to be needed in-house. Do you upskill? Do you reskill? Do you hire? Those types of questions, that's what you call us for. That's what you call a consultant for. So that we're here to help. Like I said, it's hard. Don't do it alone. You don't have to do it alone. Give us a call and we'll help you figure it out.
Okay, amazing. So I completely agree with you. Whenever you need help, you should ask for help. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be supply chain is definitely lifeblood of the company. So think through it before you plan. On that note, Dyci, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been an insightful and fun conversation.
Yes, it's been very fun.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Dyci, head over to newgenarchitects.com. It's NewGenarchitects.com, or Keyrus.com. It's Keyrus.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Marsha Williams, who discusses various components of MRP planning and where MRP fits in the process. Also the interview with Mike Ryan, who discusses how to do sales and operations planning appropriately for a growing business. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.